Today I'm going to talk about the AutoContinue logic external module. And what this allows you to do, so let me just open it up here. I've already enabled it. And this kind of goes back to what Terry was talking about last week with the survey queue and skipping surveys based on branching logic and that kind of stuff. So what this does is it allows you to add branching logic to a series of surveys and skip them based on certain values in certain fields. And so it's pretty simple. You just have to have more than one instrument as a survey in your project, and then you just configure the module. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if we go to the designer here, I have all these surveys, and what I've done is I've set this up to where I only want people to continue the surveys if they currently have type 2 diabetes and they're 18 and they give their consent for the study. So only if this is true and if this is yes. If not, I want to bypass the last two surveys, and then I created this end survey here that just says thanks for your submission, but you're not eligible to enroll. So basically it bypasses these two in the middle here and ends up here if they're not eligible. And once I've set this up, you can see here that it adds these little symbols and tells you what the AutoContinue logic is. So if we go to the external modules here and go to configure, what I've done is I've selected the second survey, the one that I want to skip, and then I just have to add the branching logic of what I'm going to use to skip that survey. And it's kind of counterintuitive the way you have to think about it, because the logic that you put in here must be true or else the survey is going to be skipped. So this isn't you don't want to put the logic in here that is going to make you skip the survey. You're doing the opposite. So this is the logic that you want to not skip the survey, if that makes sense. So if they've said that they have diabetes and they are consenting, and then if you want to add multiple criteria, you would just click the plus sign here. So that's what I did for this one, and added just for the third instrument, I've added the same criteria. And so you could, this could be as complex as you need it to be, and you can kind of have different branches based on, if they filled something out in the first survey and you've, moved them onto the second survey, and then there's something there that you want to skip, like another survey based on a value from the second survey, you can get as creative as you need to. But it's fairly simple to just add this information, and as long as you know what your branching logic is. And what I would recommend is starting out slow, and like what I did is I put just has diabetes first, and I made sure that was working, and then I did the consent by itself and made sure that was working, and then I put them together, because if you don't want to go crazy with the branching logic right out of the gate, and then it's not working, and then you have to go back and slowly troubleshoot, everything that may or may not have gone wrong. And so it's easy to start small and build up from there than to just go whole hog and then not know exactly where the problem is. And I speak from experience, because as I was building this demo, I was doing it the way intuitively I was thinking, like, okay, I want to skip it if it's false, and I want to skip it if it's no. And so it wasn't until I realized that, this logic in the box must be true, that I was basically doing it the opposite of the way I needed to be doing it. So So let me save this, and then we'll open up the survey. So now if I click true and yes, and I submit, then it takes me to the next survey, the follow-up survey. So if I go back and refresh this, and I just click true and submit, I didn't say I consented, it was blank. It just skips all of those and goes to the end of the survey. Now this, you have to watch out for this because, I mean, you could set the survey setting to where they could go back. But as you can see, like if I just missed the field and didn't click consent, now I have no way of going back. I mean, I click the back in the browser, but I don't have the button here that says previous, that kind of thing. So if I click no here, this one's true and this one's no, it's the same thing. So all of these will just default and skip those surveys now if I don't meet that criteria. So it's fairly simple. If there's branching logic and if you don't want, like if you have some enrollment criteria or eligibility criteria that you want somebody to meet before they even waste their time filling out the rest of your surveys, you don't want to waste their time if they aren't enrolled or eligible. And so this way you can get them to say whether or not they meet these criteria, and if not, you just thank them for their time. And if they do, then you can move them on through the questionnaires as needed. So it's fairly simple. Anybody have any questions on that?
Okay. For those of you who have or looked at in the past form render skip logic, this is very similar to that, and I like how it's been set up and maybe easier to use. So, those are two ways for you to, well, three ways if you count the survey queue, ways for you to use AutoContinue, but yet bounce around a little bit. Actually, it comes to, if I remember correctly, man, can you show the online designer again for this?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing that I notice about this that may be significantly different from form render skip logic. I'd have to go back and check, but form render skip logic is the same kind of thing where it's not so intuitive necessarily, but I think it's more at the mercy of AutoContinue. So even though you try to skip something, if AutoContinue is turned on, then the form render skip logic doesn't work the way you might expect it to. You really need to turn off the form skip logic so that it will determine what forms load next. The survey queue is sort of the same way, but the AutoContinue logic, clearly bypasses the AutoContinue logic, which is why I guess it's called AutoContinue logic.
Yeah.
So that you can go to where you really want to go, and yet still have the AutoContinue turned on.
Yeah, so, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Terry, because I forgot to mention that before. In order for this to work, you have to have the AutoContinue turned on for the surveys.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, that's key. So it gives you another tool, and I can't stress how important the comment that Manuel made about the branching logic and going slowly. unless you have worked with logic statements a lot in your life, even for me, and I've worked with logic statements for years, I have to proceed very slowly because when you start combining and statements with or statements, you can't just have like 4 or 5 and or statements in a branching logic statement and have it work correctly, because they will conflict and you need parentheses around them. And so if you run into situations with branching logic or something like the AutoContinue logic where it's not working correctly and you have and or statements in your logic, please don't hesitate to reach out to us so we can take a look at it and maybe help you get the parentheses in the right place. Everybody on our team uses each other as a second pair of eyes to look at something that's not working because it's so easy to miss a parentheses here, or you'll look at something for a long time and just miss why it's not working. And yet the module itself works fine, but the programming that you added to it is not perfect. So I highly recommend or agree with what Manuel said about build your logic slowly, keep testing, and make sure that it's working as you go along, rather than just throw a bunch of strings of and or statements in there. Okay.
Yep. And I found this to be a lot easier to configure and set up than the form render skip logic.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that, and I like that, especially because there are so many times that you want that AutoContinue turned on. It's intuitive. People have gotten used to AutoContinue, and then they add the form skip logic, and it doesn't work. And then they're like, well, this module doesn't work, or, it's too complicated. On the other hand, form skip logic has its place. So each is useful, and if you need help in deciding how to use either, again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We all are pretty familiar with how they work. And I love this with a little added icon to show what the logic is. That's awesome.
Yeah, because then that way you don't have to go into the module and see it all. Because even with the form skip render logic, you have to go into the external module and just see it all in the configuration to figure out exactly what you have set up. Whereas here, okay, there's something acting on this that I need to be aware of, and then you can immediately see what fields are, it's kind of like when you just look at the branching logic on a field, it just shows you immediately what the criteria are for that.
Right. And just even though Carlos had answered his own question, I do think it's useful to just make a quick comment. He had originally asked if there was an advantage to using this versus the survey queue. And the advantage to this is to be able to bypass the AutoContinue feature within each survey. The survey queue, it is great for calling surveys in a certain order, but if you have the AutoContinue on, it will override, it will compete with the survey queue. So the survey queue is great. It's a first place to go when you're trying to determine what loads, because you're putting branching logic in there to say, well, I only want to show this survey if this criteria is true, and it's not so much a skip, it's a only show this if this is true. So it's a good question, Carlos, even though you answered it for yourself. It's worth just touching on.